Hope you're enjoying your popcorn. We couldn't resist, theatre, screen. We thought, what do you need? You need a little bit of popcorn. So my lovely mum and dad and our 13-year-old helped me fill the bags yesterday. The bags came, and they were nearly as big as our 10-year-old son. I've got a great picture of him holding up two bags like this. You could probably get in them. I think he would have liked to, actually. And you'll be pleased to hear there's a little bit left. So I was thinking, actually, obviously we've put a little bit in the bags, but I reckon the 5 of us in our family could have got through one of those big bags fairly easily. So we've now got Mike Robbins, the wonderful Mike Robbins, joining us from the US. And he is going to appear on our screen, hopefully. So hello, Mike. I don't think you can see me, but I think you can hear me. Yeah. Hey! So Mike is an author, he's a thought leader, he's an executive coach, he's written 5 books, he's done an amazing TED Talk, which he may sort of share some of those same thoughts with us around recognition and appreciation. He's my new favourite podcast, we're all in this together, there are some wonderful episodes, and he just talks for half an hour, and it's so engaging. There was a particular one I loved recently called What If It All Works Out? And when I've been a bit worried about putting on this event, I've channeled that, what if it all works out? And obviously, of course, you're all here, it's lovely, it is all working out. And another one about the power of possibility. So Mike is going to speak to us for a bit, share some of his thoughts, and then take some questions, I hope. Yes, he's nodding away. So, Mike, over to you.
When my professional baseball career ended. So I grew up here in the US, actually in California near San Francisco, where I still live. And I played baseball all growing up. I know baseball is not a very big sport in the UK, but it's quite a big sport here in America. And I was pretty good at baseball. I actually got drafted right out of high school by the New York Yankees, one of our professional baseball teams here in the US. And I didn't end up signing a contract with the Yankees at that time because I got an opportunity to play baseball in college at Stanford University, which is about an hour from where I grew up. So I go to Stanford, I play baseball there, I get my education. Then I got drafted again by the Kansas City Royals, another one of our pro baseball teams here in North America. And the way that it works in professional baseball here is you get drafted by one of the 30 major league baseball teams. You have to go into what's called the minor leagues. And there's a bunch of levels of the minor leagues. You got to kind of work your way up to get to the major leagues. And so I go into the minor leagues. I'm working my way up, chasing my dream that I've had since I was quite young. And I go out to pitch one night. My 3rd season, I'm still in the minor leagues, and I throw one pitch. I tear ligaments in my elbow. I blow my arm out. I'm 23 years old at the time when I get injured. I started playing baseball when I was 7. 2 years, 3 surgeries later, I was forced to retire from baseball. And as you can imagine, I was upset, right? I mean, I was devastated. This had been the focus of my life since I was a kid. But as disappointed as I was when my baseball career ended, and as much as I didn't really know what I was going to do next, one of the questions that I asked myself over and over again when I realized that my sports career was over was, did I have any regrets? You know, if I could do anything different, what would I do different? And as I would look back on the whole experience, I realized I didn't regret a lot of the stuff that I thought I would have, like the bad games that I had and the times that I really blew it and I got super stressed out when I was playing. The only regret that I had was that I didn't fully appreciate it while it was happening. I was too busy trying to make it, right? I was this kid who grew up with a single mom. We didn't have a lot of money. I was going to make it to the major leagues. I was going to make a lot of money. I was going to, be successful. And up to that point in my life, even though I was actually pretty good at baseball, I spent most of my time thinking that I wasn't good enough, comparing myself to everyone around me, and literally like holding my breath, hoping that I didn't mess it up. And when it was all said and done and I hadn't made it, I thought to myself, oops, I think I missed the point. How many of you can relate to this in your own life? Right? Our stories may be different. Our backgrounds may be different. We may be from different parts of the world, which we are. But one of the things we have a tendency to do with good intention. Those of us that are interested in not only being successful, but helping other people, as all of you are, of doing important work in the world, we tend to focus a lot of our attention on where we're headed. And in the process of doing that, we forget to appreciate where we are. And for me, it was a pretty painful way to learn a really important lesson at a relatively young age. Now, I didn't know the full significance of the lesson. I moved back home. I had to get a job and, figure out my life now that I wasn't an athlete. I got a job working for a technology company in the late 90s here in the San Francisco, Silicon Valley area where I live. And, I didn't know much about technology or we're having a real job, but I noticed a couple of things when I got my first real job. And I had noticed this as an athlete, but I was fascinated by this phenomenon that it wasn't always the most talented people that were the most successful. And it wasn't always the most successful people that seemed the happiest and the most fulfilled. And that was interesting to me. And I also noticed on a group and team level, it wasn't always the most talented group of individuals that necessarily made the best and most cohesive and effective team. And those are things that I had noticed all those years playing sports. But now I was in the real world and I noticed them here as well. And after working for a few technology companies in the 90s, I became so fascinated by these phenomena. Like, how do we take any talent we might have and turn it into success? How do we take any success we have and actually have that manifest itself into fulfillment? And how, as groups and teams, how can we come together? How can we trust each other, support each other? And those curiosities actually had me start my consulting business almost 23 years ago, really wanting to study some of these phenomena. And that's what I've been studying: positive psychology, group and team dynamics, mindset. And what it's resulted in is the 5 books that I've written and a lot of the research that I've done, and having an opportunity to work with a lot of different people in a lot of different environments here in the US and around the world, and quite a few organizations and individuals who work in healthcare. So while I'm not an expert on your industry and what you do, I do have quite a bit of experience working with and talking to healthcare providers. And so what we're going to talk about, what I'm going to share with you, is a few ideas around the importance of appreciation in the context of what you're here talking about today around hope and really excellence and civility. And what can you do individually? What can you all do collectively to most effectively lead with appreciation and with kindness? It's a simple idea, and really tapping into the power of appreciation seems almost like too simple. But when we really unpack appreciation and understand it a bit more, there's some really powerful things we can do as a way to support and empower ourselves, but also really enhance our relationships, our teams, and in the case of the important and critical work that you do, provide care for people in the most effective, kind, authentic, successful way. So my hope is that you find this useful and valuable, and you can take some stuff from this that you can put into practice in your work, but also in your life and your relationships. And then as I'm going, I hope by the end of my time here, you'll have some questions and we can have a little bit of a dialogue. So one question I have for you that I'd like for you to think about is, think of a specific time where you felt appreciated at work. Maybe it was by colleagues or people that you work with, maybe patients or people that you care for. But what was said or done that had you feel appreciated? So if you just think of an instance, maybe it was last week, maybe it was last month, maybe it was 5 years ago, but like a significant moment where you felt appreciated. Because one of the things about appreciation is it's very personal and specific. And we all feel appreciated in different ways. There are certain things that touch us or really speak to us. But usually most expressions of appreciation, whether they're big and formal, whether they're simple and day to day, they actually impact us on a personal level. And so one of the things, because of the work that I do and the research that I've done around positive psychology and the power of appreciation, I get invited to speak at a lot of recognition events for some of our clients, big companies, healthcare companies, finance companies. Again, we work in lots of different industries, but I was speaking at an event, a recognition event. This was probably, 7, 8 years ago in Miami, Florida, for a big financial services firm here in the US. And they had people that came in from all over the US. They were all receiving this big award. There was a couple hundred recipients. and they came to this event, and they were able to bring a spouse, and it was a very nice event. And I always enjoy speaking at these events because people are in a pretty good mood, right? They've just won an award. So anyway, one of the questions that I love to ask when I'm speaking to people in this context is, what was it about winning this award that had you feel appreciated? Was there a moment? Was there an instance? What was done or said that, and I had everybody in the room. There was just the award winners, their spouses and guests weren't in this particular session, pair up with each other, and they just kind of shared. And after I had them share, I said, does anybody want to say what you were talking about with your partner? And a couple of people raised their hand, and I called on them, and they were expressing it. And this one guy was in the back of the room. He raised his hand and he stood up and he said, Mike, I hadn't really thought about it until you just asked the question. And he said, I never expected to win this award. I was surprised. My wife and I have 3 kids. We don't usually travel without the kids. So to come to this event is such a gift, and it's we're really enjoying it. He said, but when you asked the question and I really thought about it, he said, I remember the day that I found out that I'd won this award a few months ago. And when I went home and told my family, he said, my oldest son told me he was proud of me. And he said, that was the moment for me. Like, I was really touched by that. And as he said it, all of us in the room were like, you could sort of feel it really came from his heart. And there's usually a moment, an instance. There's something's done, is something said that has us feel appreciated. Again, knowing a little bit about the stress and the challenge of the work that you do in healthcare, so much of what gets focused on is what's wrong or what could go wrong, or the feedback that we often get is about something not working or people being upset or concerned, right? Understandable, but challenging. And so in the midst of the seriousness of the work that you do, there are probably moments where, whether again it comes from patients or people you're caring for, or it comes from coworkers and people that you work with, if and when someone can actually in a meaningful way say something or do something for us that has us feel appreciated and valued, it really does make a difference. And when we can do that for other people, same thing. Now, again, it's got to be genuine. It's got to be real. We can't just be running around. There's a phenomenon that you can imagine. Lots of us here in the United States, and especially where I live in California, we got to be careful to not fall into that phenomenon of toxic positivity, where it's not real, it's not genuine, right? So along those lines, let's talk a little bit about what makes appreciation difficult or challenging. Now, it's weird to think of it that way because appreciation is such a positive thing. But what makes it challenging to effectively express appreciation for other people? What gets in the way of us doing that? I mean, there's some practical things. Again, given the work that you do, the seriousness of it. And I can only imagine, look, I had a deep level of appreciation for people who work in healthcare for a long time. I always have. And then I think about what we've all been through the last few years with the pandemic. And it's like, oh my goodness, the level of stress, the level of trauma that all of you have gone through in providing healthcare for people through a global pandemic. It's, I can't imagine it myself because I'm not in your shoes, but, and here we are on the other side of the pandemic, although still dealing with aspects of it and COVID and all the things, but so much of the stress and the challenge. And so if you're in a stressful environment, if you're working in healthcare, if you're working in an environment where literally, I mean, oftentimes I'm speaking to managers and leaders in technology companies or finance companies or even, nonprofit organizations or government agencies. And I will often say, hey, the work's important. Yes, it matters, but it's not life and death. Now, I don't say that obviously when I'm talking to people who work in healthcare, because we are dealing with people's lives and their health and their wellness, the most important and at times the most vulnerable aspect of being human. And so the environment being challenging, stressful, the stakes being pretty high can get in the way of us looking for, finding, and expressing appreciation. Other things that can make appreciation difficult or challenging is like, look, most of us, even if you consider yourself a relatively optimistic person, And maybe some of you know I'm not very optimistic. I'm actually much more pessimistic. You know this. We have a negativity bias in our nervous system, but for safety, for survival. Thank goodness we have that, right? I mean, thank goodness, memories get stored in the amygdala so that we don't continue to burn our hands on stoves and get hit by cars in the middle of the street and fall down stairs and not understand right? But the problem with the negativity bias is we then are bringing it into everyday interactions. And oftentimes, look, I was speaking at an event earlier this week to a group of people who manage safety and security for big retail brands. So their job is to look for people who are stealing things and doing bad things. And what I said to them, and obviously their work is different than yours, but I said, what makes you good at your job actually gets in the way of you being a really good leader and relator to other humans. And I mean this respectfully, but again, even as people who work in healthcare, we're looking for and dealing with issues, challenges, threats, finding the problem, diagnosing the illness, looking at what's wrong so that it can be taken care of. That's a really important skill set. You are highly trained, and it's a necessary skill set. When I go see my doctor, I want him to be kind to me, of course, but I want him to look and take the tests and see what's going on if I have an issue so that he can diagnose that and then get me what I need. But if that's how we're looking at life, what's wrong, what's the problem, where's the illness that we need to diagnose, that gets in the way of us looking for and finding things to value and appreciate about other people. So you have to be able to switch in and out of, I have this mindset when I'm doing the work, and I have this other mindset when I'm actually interacting with human beings. Look, we tend to be somewhat cynical. And over the last few years, given everything that's happened, in most cases, in most environments I am, especially in healthcare, morale is down, people are stressed, people are tired, right? It's a bad analogy, but for the last number of years I've been using the analogy. You know that thing they say when you put the frog in the boiling water, they jump out because it's too hot, but you put the frog in the room temperature water and you turn the heat up and turn the heat up and turn the heat up. The frog doesn't even realize it's getting so hot, right? They don't jump out of the water. And we've been the frogs in the water. The water's just gotten hotter and hotter and hotter. And so what that then does is it leads to burnout. It leads to stress. When my cup is empty, I don't have a lot to give to others. And again, you all know this better than just about anyone else on the planet. Another interpersonal thing that can get in the way of expressing appreciation for other people. How many of you notice when someone expresses appreciation for you, you get a little funny about it? You get a little weird or awkward or uncomfortable with it. Yeah, most of us do to some degree, right? It's like, what do I say? How do I respond? It can be, even though it's a beautiful, really important human interaction, it can be a vulnerable and uncomfortable one. Do you know what you're supposed to say, though, when someone expresses appreciation for you, when someone compliments you or lets you know that they value you or care? You know what you're supposed to say? Thank you. Then, this is the most important part, shut your mouth. Because most of us, if you listen to yourself, what comes after the thanks, if you even do say thanks, is almost always weird and insincere, right? We either give a compliment right back, you too, you're great, which is weird. That's like if I came over to your house or to your flat on your birthday with a present and I said, hey, happy birthday. It would be really strange if you ran into the other room and came with a present for me. Like, it's not my birthday. What? But even worse, we argue with people or we discount their compliment. You ever do that? Someone expresses appreciation for you, like, oh no, oh stop, oh, what are you saying? What are you expecting them to say in response? Oh, you're right, you're an idiot. I was just kidding. No, that's like me giving you a birthday present and you taking it and not even opening it and throwing it on the floor and saying, what's the matter with you? I don't deserve that. You would ruin the gift, offend the giver, and I'm probably not going to give you very many more gifts. You know what we now know about the expression of appreciation, the offer of kindness to another human being? If it's offered, if you express appreciation or kindness for me, and I receive your appreciation, your kindness, it actually raises the serotonin level in both of our brains. So it has a physiological impact, calming us down, alleviating some stress. If we do it collectively in a group, It raises our serotonin level and our oxytocin level. So yes, it can be awkward sometimes. And look, culturally, I mean, even here in America, we can be super obnoxious and like, hey, look at me, I'm great. People get super awkward about appreciation. When I'm in the UK and I'm in other places where, again, culturally, people are very much like, hey, I understand it can be awkward. It can be uncomfortable. But by receiving the appreciation and not discounting it and not deflecting, we actually get to experience the appreciation, the kindness that others have for us. And culturally, I have seen this one thing transform the culture of teams. It actually creates more connection, more trust, more psychological safety when we know we can look for and find things to appreciate about each other and express it. Yeah, it can be a little awkward in the moment. Yeah, we have to have some courage and some vulnerability that we embrace to both express and receive appreciation. But you know what I've never heard anyone say to me in all the years I've done research on this, and I have literally talked to so many people all over the world in different environments. You know what I've never heard anyone say to me? You know what, Mike? I'm just too appreciated. Yeah, it's really getting on my nerves. My coworkers and my manager and the people that I work with and my friends and my family, they're really all bugging me. They're appreciating me too much. I wish they would stop. No, nobody's ever said that to me. You know why no one's ever said that? Because no one actually feels overappreciated. Most of us feel somewhat, if not significantly, underappreciated. So here's one of the simple, but I think really important unlocks for us around appreciation is understanding the distinction between recognition and appreciation. This is kind of the core idea in my TED Talk, as was mentioned when I was introduced, but I've been looking at this for many, many years, and it's so simple, but recognition is about results. It's about what people do. It's about outcomes, right? And look, in healthcare, we want to focus on outcomes because outcomes have to do with people's health and well-being and literally people living or dying. So results matter. They matter everywhere, but we want to recognize results, outcomes, what people do. Appreciation is about who people are. It's about their value. Recognition's about results, appreciation's about people. Recognition's about performance, appreciation's about valuing and caring about people. The best way I know to describe the difference between these two things, I will give you an example from my baseball career. Now, again, I understand many of you probably aren't all that familiar with baseball. I know there's not much baseball in the UK, but I was a pitcher in baseball. That's the position that I played. Do you know what happens in the baseball game when the pitcher does not do well? They literally stop the game. And the manager, the guy in charge, walks out to the middle of the field, physically removes the ball from your hand and makes you leave, and then hands the ball to someone else. I mean, look, I guess in football, which I know is a big sport in the UK, like players get subbed out and it's kind of a big deal. But this is like when you're the pitcher, you're like the center of attention, and then they take you out of the game and give the ball to the next person and they take over. Again, imagine you were having a bad day at work and you like made a mistake, like kind of a big one, but you had like your manager, whoever you report to, burst on the scene and said, stop right there. And you had to walk off the premises and someone else came in and took over and started doing your job for you. Oh, and imagine thousands of people are watching this happen. Pretty embarrassing. The worst part of the whole experience is when I would walk off the field, I'd go sit down on the bench and nobody would talk to me, especially if I did really bad. Like I gave up 7 runs in the second inning and we're losing really bad. And it was kind of this weird unwritten rule. Oh, leave him alone. He's upset. And yes, I was upset. If I got pulled out of the game, I was very upset, especially if we were losing 7-0 and I had not done a very good job. I was incredibly upset. But you know what I could have used in those situations when I was sitting on the bench after just getting pulled out of the game? What do you think? Not recognition. What are they going to say? Hey, Robbins, way to go. Great job, man. Oh, no, I didn't do a great job. I did a bad job. No, the results are not good. We don't want to celebrate and recognize mediocre or poor results. That sends the wrong message. That's not helpful. That's not healthy. But what I needed in those moments and almost never got was some appreciation. Not for my performance, but for me, the human, the person. What could they have said? I don't know. But that was rough, man, but you're an important part of the team. We got your back, right? We believe in you. Expressing that appreciation, expressing that kindness, that care, that concern, that compassion Appreciation is about valuing people. It's about caring about people. It's not necessarily about praising them. It may be, but it's more about letting someone know you're valued, you're cared about. I see you. I got you. Right? So often, again, in healthcare, I want, when I go to see the doctor myself, when I take our children, we have 2 teenage daughters, when I take them, I mean, now it's a little different than when they were little, but I want whatever's going on to be addressed. I want the result to be that I feel better, they feel better, we get our questions answered, we understand what's going on, of course. But I also want to know that the person providing the healthcare, whether I know them really well and have worked with them for a long time, or I'm at the emergency room, or it's you know, my doctor's away on holiday and there's someone I want to know that they actually care about me as a human being. And for us, when we work with people on a regular basis, yes, of course, we want to recognize performance and outcome when it's deserving of recognition, but we want to appreciate people all the time. When I was sitting on that bench after having a bad game, I wanted to know that I was still valued and cared about, even though I hadn't performed well, even though I was disappointed with the result. Does that make sense? And when we separate this out, what we realize is, we recognize people when they deserve it, when they've earned it. We have a high bar, a healthy high bar of expectation of ourselves, of others, not perfection demands, not never good enough, right? It's got to be attainable. And then when we meet or exceed that, ourselves or other people meet or exceed the expectation, we recognize that in some, informal way. Hey, good job, way to go. Or some more formal way, like here's an award, a bonus, a promotion, right there. But we care about people all the time. We value people all the time. Look, one of the things that makes appreciation challenging, what we were talking about before, right, is sometimes we don't like people, or people get on our nerves, or people bother us or bug us, right? Of course, we're not going to like everybody. And in the environments that you're in, it's stressful. People, like, when my kid is sick or when I'm sick, I'm not the best version of myself usually. I don't want to be rude and disrespectful to the doctors and the nurses and the people, but like I want to get what I want to get. And I'm probably not going to be as open and kind and compassionate as if I'm just got done meditating or I'm, feeling great. You know what I mean? So you deal with people often who not in the best moments of their lives. And that could be true sometimes for your coworkers. And then given everything that's gone on the last few years, but appreciation doesn't mean like, agree with, think is wonderful. Appreciate means recognize the value of. And we can recognize the value of everyone, whether we like them or not, whether they're easy for us to interact with or not, whether they're producing great results or not. So appreciation is really a skill that we can build. We have to separate it out and realize I'm responsible for looking for and finding things to appreciate about people. Now, that doesn't mean people don't have their own responsibility, but recognition is based on what they do. So if I'm recognizing you, you have to do something worthy of recognition. Appreciation is based on me valuing and caring about you. It's not based on you having the perfect personality or not making a mistake or saying or doing exactly the thing I want you to. Those are different. Does that make sense? And everyone is worthy of appreciation. Not everybody does things that are worthy of recognition. Does that make sense? So what can we do? What does this look like? Oh, this is a really important one. I forgot. This is a study by Glassdoor. And I think Glassdoor is a global thing. I know it's a big thing here in the US, but this is basically an organization and a website where people can comment on their real experience of work, where they work, how they like working there. But they do a lot of research on workplace health and different cultures. But they found in this recent study that 53% of people who left their jobs, they left their company in different industries, right? They would have stayed longer if they felt more appreciated. 81% of people said they are more motivated to work harder when they actually are appreciated, while only 38% said they're motivated to work harder by a demanding manager or boss. So appreciation actually is a practical thing. If we can incorporate that into how we lead, how we operate, how we communicate, people are going to be more engaged in whatever we do. I mean, this is thinking about it in the context of work, but you can also think about this in the context of your relationships with patients and people that you work with, but also even at home. So what are some things we can do? What does appreciation in action look like? Focus on strengths, right? Your own strengths, other people's strengths. That's like the core of positive psychology. As I was saying earlier, when someone expresses appreciation for you, just say thanks, just receive it, even and especially if you don't agree with them. You can send an email of appreciation, right? I know we get too much email, but every now and again, just send a note out, copy some people, let them know, hey, thank you. Hey, I saw that. Hey, I appreciate that. Focus on what you're grateful for often. And remember to appreciate yourself. Look, one of the things I find when I work with people in healthcare, especially, and I know you know this, and I know you've heard this, and you've probably been talking about it in different ways today, but so often you do such a great job caring for others, being there for others, showing up for others. Oftentimes, we forget to do that for ourselves. I remember seeing a physician actually on TV doing an interview. This was probably 15 years ago, and he was talking about self-care, the importance of self-care. And he said, look, it's hard for us as human beings. I know he said it's hard for me as a physician, for many of us as parents, as, he said, but the human body is a great metaphor. There's a great metaphor inside of all of our bodies right now. It's our heart. Our heart's pumping involuntarily, thankfully, keeping us all alive. And he said, but when the heart beats, and again, many of you know this better than I do, but he just broke it down. He said, the heart pumps blood to itself first, and then it pumps blood to the rest of the body. It has to fill itself up first before it can take care of the body. It's not selfish. It's just the mechanism. It's the design. If it didn't do that, it wouldn't be strong enough. He said that's what self-care is. It's us pumping blood to ourselves first so that we can pump blood to those around us. It's not selfish to appreciate yourself. It's necessary. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. It's necessary. If you're burned out, stressed out, as I imagine many of you are, understandably, you caring for yourself actually allows you to show up and care for other people. You being kind to yourself allows you to more authentically be kind for others. So as I close this, and then I do want to open it up for some questions, I want you to think about right here, right now, in this moment, towards the end of the day here in this beautiful conference you've been attending, either in person or online, like, what are you grateful for right now in your life? Just let yourself think of that. Who do you appreciate? What do you appreciate? I'll close with one last story, and then we can have a few questions related to gratitude. Because sometimes even hard things, with some perspective, we can be grateful for. I was in the car with our older daughter, Samantha, who's now 17. She was 4 at the time. We have a younger daughter, Rosie, who's 15. She was about a year and a half. And Samantha and I were driving in the car. We were actually going to a baseball game when she was little, and just the two of us, little daddy-daughter time. It was kind of cute. And she's sitting in the back seat in her little booster seat. And she says to me, hey, Daddy, are you going to play in the game? And I said, no. But she knew that I had played baseball. And no, honey, Daddy's not going to play. Well, why not? I said, well, honey, Daddy doesn't play baseball anymore. Well, why not? When they're 3, 4, they ask a lot of why not questions. And I said, well, honey, Daddy hurt his arm and I had to have surgeries. And and first she was a little scared. Then she was a little confused. And eventually she got it. She said, oh, I get it, Daddy. You mean you can't play baseball anymore? I said, that's right. And then she asked me a simple question, but one that I wasn't quite prepared for. She said, Daddy, are you sad about that? Wasn't expecting my 4-year-old to ask me about my emotional well-being. I mean, I appreciated it, but it took me off guard. It caught me off guard a little bit. And I took a second. I took a breath and I thought to myself, just give her an honest answer. Like, don't just say something, flippant. And I said, honey, I appreciate you asking. I'm not sad. I said, I was sad. I was really sad when it happened. It was a big deal. I was super sad. I said, but that was a long time ago. I'm not sad anymore. I said, in fact, honey, I'm grateful. And she said, grateful? Because she knew what grateful meant, even at 4 years old. She said, well, why are you grateful that you hurt your arm and you can't play baseball anymore? And I said, well, honey, if Daddy never hurt his arm, I never would have met Mommy. And I wouldn't be your daddy. And then I burst into tears. And she was like, Daddy, are you okay? And I was like, whoa, shocked at how emotional I got in that moment. And I have no idea if she got it, but I know that I got it at a whole deeper level. Look, the issue isn't whether or not we're going to have challenges in life. And I mean, given the work that you do, wow, given what we've all been through, what you've all been through the last few years, the question is, do we have the willingness, the capacity, the courage to look for and find things to be grateful for, look for and find things to appreciate about others? Sometimes it's harder to do so for understandable reasons, but it's so powerful. That's the real power of appreciation. So I'd love to hear if you have any questions or thoughts or comments before my time is up here. I appreciate you inviting me to join you virtually, and I hope you found some of that useful. But we can go ahead and open it up to questions.
I'll kick off if that's all right. It's Adrian here.
Hey, Adrian.
Yeah, good to hear from you. That was fantastic. Thanks so much. You explained it really clearly, and it's a really inspiring message. The Learning from Excellence initiative, and hundreds of people in the room and online will be engaging with it. It involves, at its heart, writing notes of appreciation and recognition, actually, for colleagues, and they tend to be sent privately, with a few people copied in, basically a type of email.
Yeah.
And they're obviously they're in written format. And I've been wondering for some time if there's a difference between written appreciation versus this kind of verbal shout out, and also the difference between much more public recognition and appreciation versus the more private. Have you got any thoughts on which is more impactful, or if it depends on the situation?
You know, what the research shows us, and what I know personally and anecdotally, is a couple things. It varies depending on the person. So again, most of us have a preference one way or the other. I mean, maybe it doesn't really matter, but it's like, would I rather receive it in writing? Because if I receive it in writing, even if it's electronic, I could print it, I can save it, I can keep it. Would I rather receive it verbally? And there's also a distinction between, would I rather receive it publicly? And just because if you want to receive appreciation or even recognition publicly, that doesn't mean you're an egomaniac. It just means, hey, it's kind of nice when other people hear about it as well. On the flip side, there are people who are mortified and really, really uncomfortable to receive public recognition or appreciation. So one of the things, Adrian, that I often will coach people, and especially leaders and managers around this, is you can ask people, how do you like to be appreciated? If I were going to express appreciation for you, if I'm going to recognize you, which is part of my job as your teammate or your colleague or your manager or supervisor, if that's the role that I'm in, I'd like to know, like, what works best for you. Because I've had many situations over the years where I can even remember working with a company and they had this big surprise recognition event for someone they wanted to honor, and the person hated it because they were very private person and they much would have preferred just a written note and a little thing and not made a big deal about. So we want to really check in with people because it's not a one size fits all.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I suspected. It's very personal. We tend to err on the side of caution, I think, and try and keep it a bit on the private side.
The other thing we do, Adrian, is we think that other people want to be appreciated the way we want to be appreciated, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, quite right. I don't want to hog the mic, so let's see if there are any other questions in the room. Oh, there's a question online coming to you now, Mike.
Hi, yeah. One of the questions online is, how do you balance appreciation and accountability?
I think that's a really important question, and a couple things to think about. If we really understand that distinction between recognition and appreciation, we can even talk to people and say, look, I want you to feel valued and appreciated and cared about by me all the time, because that is really important. That said, I'm not going to recognize you all the time, because even if you perform really well, nobody performs well 100% of the time, right? So the way we balance accountability, again, it's like, if this is great, if people meet or exceed that level of greatness, then they get recognized. If it's just good, we want to know the difference between good and great. If it's mediocre, we want to know the difference between mediocre and good and great. If it's poor, there's a difference between, you know what I mean? So we talk about performance and accountability without shame, without judgment, without some moral superiority. But it's like, I'm going to recognize you when you deserve it. I'm going to coach you when I think coaching is necessary. I'm going to hold you accountable to the standards by which we operate. And separately, I'm going to do everything I can to have you feel valued, appreciated, cared about, nurtured. Because what drives performance is a high level of both expectation and nurturance at the same time. So when I think about accountability and appreciation, I don't think of them as mutually exclusive or even contradictory, because I think we can have very kind but very firm and direct conversations about accountability, and people can still really feel valued. Another way to think about this is, think of the people in your life who you will take feedback from. You may not always like their feedback. You may not always agree with their feedback, but you will take their feedback. Why do you take their feedback? Because they're the smartest person you know? Probably not. Because they're an expert in the area in which they're giving you feedback on? Maybe, but that's not necessary. We take feedback from people because we already know that they care about us and value us. That's already been established. Then I'm open to your feedback. You could be wicked smart and really competent and clear and an expert in your field. And the feedback you could give to me is be very spot on and skillful. If I don't know that you care about me and value me and want what's best for me, I'm probably not going to take your feedback, or I'm at least going to be suspect or a bit defensive about it. Does that make sense? So appreciating people, making sure people feel valued actually makes it easier for us to hold them accountable and give them feedback when necessary.
That's great. There's thanks, Mike. There's another question in the room. Yep.
Hi, thank you. My name's Sarah. Fantastic talk, and I've chosen which book I'm going to buy, but I'm not going to share it with the group. So you touched very briefly on the topic of toxic positivity, and I just wanted to ask you a bit more about that. Sometimes in the NHS we're encouraged to relentlessly focus on positivity, and that I think sometimes that's because some of the issues we face are very difficult, very thorny. We've had the Lucy Letby case in the UK recently, which colleagues in the room will know about. And sometimes these thorny issues get labelled as too difficult, and everyone's told, don't touch it with a barge pole. And so those difficult areas are allowed to fester while the majority of the organisation are trying to focus on the positive things because no one's brave enough to go to the depths. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up, because there's a lot of paradox in this. Like, look, most of us know at some level positivity is important and necessary. Hopefulness. I mean, that's one of the core themes of why we're all gathered today, right? It's got to be genuine, though. I often say to people, if we put icing on mud, it doesn't make it a cake. So just because we act positive or we talk positively about things doesn't eradicate the negativity or the challenge. That said, we also know how toxic it is when all we're doing is whining and complaining and arguing and griping about the issues. So where this comes together, I've also done a lot of research around authenticity and vulnerability. So how we mitigate against toxic positivity is we can stay authentically positive in our mindset and our approach, but we can, as what I like to say, lower the waterline on the iceberg and really get to a deeper level of authenticity and vulnerability about thorny issues or difficult stuff. What I mean by that is, so something comes up that's controversial or that's hard to discuss or people have really strong opinions about, or right? What we want to do is talk a little bit more about how we actually feel. Because there's a difference if I whine and complain about an issue. This is stupid, or I hate this, or why do we do this, or I can't stand this, or this is driving me. That may be justified. But if I go a little deeper and say, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling like I don't know how to solve this problem, or this keeps coming up. Now we start to take a little more ownership, if that makes sense. You know, a mentor of mine years ago said to me, Mike, you know what stands between you and the kind of relationships you really want to have with people? I said, what's that? He said, it's usually a 10-minute sweaty palmed conversation you're too afraid to have. He said, if you get good at those 10-minute sweaty palmed conversations, you'll have fantastic relationships. You'll talk about hard things. You'll address the elephant in the room. You'll give feedback. You'll get feedback. You'll bring stuff up sooner rather than later. You'll get to know people who are different than you. You'll work out conflicts. He said, but if you do like most of us and you avoid those sweaty palm conversations because they can be awkward, they can be uncomfortable, they can be upsetting. He said, then you end up being a victim of who you work with, who you live with. So that's a long way of me saying, like, we can absolutely be authentically positive and bring in that appreciative inquiry, bring in that positive psychology approach, but at the same time, tell the truth about what's going on. This is hard, or I'm finding this really challenging. Can we talk about this in a productive way and not just dance around it because we don't have the answer or it brings up some hard feelings? You know, another thing that I've learned in response to this is great teams talk to each other, not about each other. Great teams choose to be optimistic, choose to be positive, but in a real way. So again, it is somewhat paradoxical because you all are dealing with some serious stuff, some thorny things, some stuff that we could spin it any which way, and there's no way to spin it in a genuinely positive way because it's not a positive thing. But we can approach it that way as long as we're conscious about it. Does that make sense?
A lot of sense. Thank you. That was
Thank you
a
for the
great answer.
question.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Just while we're waiting for another one, I'd add to it as well. I think it's much easier to face these difficult, crucial conversations, to raise concerns, which may be safety or other concerning issues, if the culture is appreciative. So I find it much easier to talk to a colleague to challenge them if I know that our relationship is strong because we've been, in general, sincerely appreciative to each other in the past.
For sure. And one other thing I'll say about that, Andrea, is how I start most sweaty palm conversations that I have, because I don't love having them. I usually start by saying, I don't really want to have this conversation, right? I'm feeling scared or uncomfortable to talk about this thing. And that usually, when we're vulnerable with people, the natural human response to vulnerability, even though it can be scary, is empathy. So there's more connection from that place of vulnerability. When we avoid it, or we come in with a lot of defenses up already, we're more likely to create a defensive response.
How are we doing for time? Yes, another one there?
Yeah, there's a question online. It says, how do we start to change cultures that are negative, but coming from the top layers, and when challenged, nothing is done?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's tricky. I mean, look, the truth is, we can't really change people or even change cultures. We can influence. And the way that we start influencing, the first place we start is with ourselves, right? What did Gandhi teach us? Be the change. So if you want the culture to be more positive, more appreciative, more kind, more fill in the blank, right? Can we start not being perfect, but can I start being appreciative? Can I start appreciating myself? Can I start appreciating the people around me? And then wherever we fall in the hierarchy of the matrix of the organization, I can influence my peers, the people that I work with on a regular basis. If I happen to manage people or supervise people, I can try to influence them. I can try to also influence my direct manager or supervisor. And the people that I touch and the concentric circles from there, if you will. Oftentimes I talk to people and they're complaining about management or, oh, they're so negative at the top or they don't ever, right? And that may be true. And I don't ever try to minimize it or pretend. But what I often say is like, look, our experience of work, while it is the macro culture impacts it for sure, it's really the people that we interact with on a daily basis. So sometimes I'm working with a team that's in a big, huge organization and they're many, many layers down from the CEO or the top. And I'll say, start by focusing on yourselves individually and the culture of this team and make it as strong and healthy and positive and appreciative and as kind as possible. And then see if as a team, you can start to influence the other people and teams and leaders that you interact with. And then organically that can start to have some change that moves around the organization. And yeah, sometimes we go and try to have some sweaty palm conversations with people at the top, and they may or may not be receptive to that. But ultimately, where we have real autonomy and ultimately where we have the most power, if you will, is with ourselves, first and foremost, and then the people that we interact with on a regular basis.
Thanks, Mike. I think you've inspired us all to go and speak to our chief execs and take this on immediately. We've also run out of time.
Yes.
We're really privileged to hear you speak, and partly because you just speak so well on this topic and you're well read and well researched, but also it's really beneficial for us to hear this from outside our service. So you're from overseas, but you're also from outside healthcare, and that just adds a lot of value. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. And thank you for what you all do. Again, I don't fully understand and appreciate it from not doing it myself, but it's so important and it's so necessary. And often, as you all know better than I do, you don't get all the appreciation that you deserve for the hard work that you do. So I just want to thank you myself.
Thank you.